The road to sainthood can last many years, but an Oklahoma priest and the first American-born male martyr will take the final step required before canonization today, when the rite of beatification is performed in his honor before an audience of thousands. The Rev. Stanley Rother was 46 when he was killed July 28, 1981, while on mission in Santiago de Titlan, Guatemala. He had served the Catholic community there for 13 years, and his death occurred in the midst of a decades-long civil war that raged from 1960 to 96. The people whom Rother lived among and served began calling for him to be honored by the Catholic Church shortly after his death, but it wasn't until the case for Rother's beatification was transferred to the Oklahoma City Diocese in 2007 that Bishop Anthony Taylor of the Little Rock Diocese, who in 1981 was a priest based just outside of Oklahoma City, became the first Episcopal delegate for Rother's cause. Caught up in war, Stanley Francis Rother was born March 27, 1935, the oldest of 4 children, and was raised on the family's farm in Okarch, Oklahoma. He completed seminary school at Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and was ordained in 1963, serving in an Oklahoma parish for 5 years before volunteering for the diocese's Guatemala mission in 1968. Taylor met Rother only once, but he still remembers the day. It was May 16, 1981, and the occasion was the ordination of Don Wolfe, a cousin of Rother's, into the Catholic priesthood. He was always a quiet person, and it was just a simple greeting we exchanged, Taylor said of their brief meeting. He looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. Taylor said the Protestant churches that dominated the area tended to be aligned with the military. The Catholic Church, which had made inroads educating and bringing the nation's poorer populations into the faith, had unwittingly made itself a target during Guatemala's civil war. Rother's death had become a direct objective in the war. He was at his cousin's ordination with the knowledge that his name was on a hit list of Catholic priests in Guatemala. It wasn't until Taylor undertook the cause for Rother's beatification in 2007 that he learned more about Rother directly from the Tzuchajal of Santiago de Titlan, an indigenous population descended from the Mayans. The Tzuchajal said that Rother was concerned about their material welfare as well as their spiritual welfare, said Taylor, who learned that Rother had drawn from his experience growing up in Oklahoma to create farming and irrigation systems. The Tzuchajal, who numbered in the thousands, were subject to a greatly reduced life expectancy because of poverty and a lack of access to food and clean water. Mortality rate cut in half. 50% of Santiago de Titlan's children, Taylor was told, died by the age of 5. By the time of Rother's death, that mortality rate had been cut in half. Rother, who had struggled greatly to learn Latin while in seminary, had gone on to learn Spanish and then Tzuchajal, the residents' native, unwritten language. Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Oklahoma City Diocese noted that Rother's command of Tzuchajal reached a level that no other priest in the Oklahoma mission to Guatemala had achieved and possibly surpassed his command of the Spanish language. Coakley, who had been studying at Mount St. Mary's, of which Rother was an alumnus at the time of Rother's death, said Rother's struggles with learning languages and with the dangers of living and ministering in Guatemala at that time inspired him throughout his years in seminary, as a priest, and through his early years as a bishop. He had struggled so mightily with Latin in seminary, and here he was in Guatemala and was ministering to a people whose primary language was not even Spanish, Coakley said. Work had begun on a translation of the New Testament into Tzuchajal, but it was a project Rother undertook and completed during his time in Guatemala, along with the Mass, giving people access to Scripture and Eucharist in their own language and providing religious instruction to them in their own language. Speaking via Oklahoma City Diocese spokesman Diane Clay, Rother's sister, Marita Rother, recalled Rother's traveling down dirty, dusty roads to hold Mass for as few as 5 or 6 people during the 2 summers she spent with her brother in Guatemala. He was there for the people. That was just so obvious, said Marita, who is a nun with the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, a Roman Catholic religious community in Wichita, Kansas. People would come to the door, Rhoda would be in the middle of a meal and they'd say they need something. He'd jump up and do it and come back and finish his dinner. "I think it was ingrained in him," Marita said. "There was always that need to serve somebody else."